Sixers may be back. For the first time all season, we have a little bit of positive vibes surrounding this Philadelphia 76ers team. They've won 4 of their last 5 leading into this matchup here, and it does seem like the vibes are turning a little different. So I'm back with my guy Jacob Moreno right here on Sixers Digest. Appreciate each and every one of you guys for joining us right here in the comments. As always, welcome. If you have not already, feel free to subscribe to the channel and be a part of the Digest family here. We are here to break down what is going on with this Sixers team. So, Jacob, we've had some pretty dark times that we've been reflecting on the start of this season, whether it's Joel Embiid injuries, whether it is them just straight up losing games they shouldn't, Paul George, the injuries to that, Nick Nurse coaching decisions, just about everything in between we can nitpick. But finally, it feels like they turned the corner. I'm starting to get back in on the Sixers team. What is your level of temperature with how they've looked on the floor these past few games and kind of your perception moving forward?
I think it was just great to pick up a win against the Bulls because there's been so many times like this season where thought about how good the Sixers have been the past few seasons and how we've just taken wins for granted. Like it would be a random Sunday last season or season before, like, oh, we're playing the Bulls. Oh yeah, we're gonna just go in cruise control. We're chilling. Like compared to this season where every game has been a battle. So
Right.
even though the Bulls chipped away at that lead a little bit, it felt good to see the Sixers actually just control the game from pretty much start to finish. Like the first quarter is competitive, but just from there Embiid really took over. It just felt like so great to see because with how stressful the season has been, how much injuries, how much drama, it was just great to see the Sixers' big three actually play for more than 6 minutes together and dominate. Even though obviously the Bulls have one of the worst defenses in the league, it was still just great to see everyone healthy for the most part.
Yeah, 100% there. And to kind of dive into things, again, it has been about as dark of a start to the season as can imagine here. But at this point in time, the Sixers have now moved up to 12th in the Eastern Conference, and things are wide open. Just in a game and a half out of the play in there, and a lot of time to take care of business and continue climbing here. But you did mention the big fella there, and that's exactly where I want to start here. Is not only did we see him drop 31 points, had 12 rebounds, 4 assists, look like the version of Joel Embiid that I straight up needed to see, that there was this concern lingering in the back of my head of, can he return to the player of the caliber of player that we truly need him to be? Because as much as we can talk about the positivity of Jared McCain, the emergence there, Paul George being a part of this team, Tyrese Maxey getting better, all these role players, it's all built around Joel Embiid, man. And if he's not capable of carrying that torch, there are some real issues there. Now, beyond just what we saw in the game, which again, I'm very encouraged by. I personally thought that's the skinniest I've seen him in years at this point. I thought that was the best that he's moved since before the knee injury last year against the Warriors. And what was even more enticing to me, or what I could not wait to see, was this update from Nick Nurse that Joel Embiid was a full participant in practice today. Start to finish was the direct quote. Shout out to Sixers Adam there for tweeting that out. So Jacob, talk to me a little about what you saw from Joel Embiid on the floor and what kind of your level of expectation for the injuries are at this current moment.
I think I want to take it back to that Bulls game. Like you said, Embiid played with a confidence and he was moving like ways we haven't seen since he tore his meniscus in January. Like he's mentioned multiple times, whether it was media day or I think maybe throughout the summer, that it's a mental thing. Him being able to trust his knee again. I think we saw a lot more of that because he truly did look like himself, and it was great to see. And a big issue, or not issue, but a concern I had with the whole Embiid load management is I was scared that he would establish rhythm, right? Like that game against Grizzlies, I think he had 35 and 11. Obviously, he'd go on to miss the next 7 games. I was scared that he would never really be able to be like consistent. And I
Right.
think, granted, he did play against Nikola Vucevic, one of the worst defensive starting centers in the NBA. But still, again, it was great to see him kind of pick up where he leaves off. So hopefully that's a sign of things to come. But obviously, they're going to have it back to back, I think, next week, I believe, against the Cavs.
Yeah, I
So we'll
believe that's
see
correct.
like if this consistency like continues. But again, with the update with Sixers Adam and Kyle Newbeck, it's great to hear because on the cherry on top on the cherry on top winning Sunday, they have now 4 days rest. They play Friday, so 2 days from now. So it's great to see that his knee responded well to playing 33 minutes and that he was a full participant. That makes me hopeful that maybe this whole load management thing was a little bit more overblown than we thought, but obviously we're only one game in for him returning. It's only December 11th, but I'm feeling good about this.
Yeah, 100%. And he has not looked like the 100% version of himself from a statistical standpoint this year. So far this season, 22.0 points per game across 5 games, 8.4 rebounds, 3.6 assists. The shooting efficiency is what particularly stands out here. 13% from three is brutal, 40.7% from the field, not good. There's no way around that here, but it's going to come up when there is a larger sample size and we actually get to see him play like that. I thought that game against the Bulls was really the first time that he looked like Joel Embiid, that it was not that way through that first stretch of those first 4 games. So I'm very impressed by that. Now, beyond just Joel Embiid, obviously the whole picture is coming together. That Tyrese Maxey himself, that he came off his first career triple-double here. It's been a little bit of a struggle for Tyrese Maxey this season. And kind of reflect on his statistical output, 24.3 points per game, which is solid there, but just 3.6 rebounds, 5.2 assists, most concerningly 40.6% from the field and 29.3% from three. I think what I've seen from Tyrese is it's very clear the game has looked significantly harder for him without the gravity of Joel Embiid out there. I think and we can kind of have a larger conversation about that. I'm not that panicked about the 24-year-old version of Tyrese Maxey kind of struggling with these, but it's clear that he's the top of the scouting report and sort of has not been able to get to his spots in the same way. So he kind of mentioned himself that he's, not seeing the same level of attention with Joel Embiid out there. But what's kind of your evaluation of Tyrese Maxey from this point? I would say it's fair to assess that it has not been the ideal start to the season, but I also think there's been some overblown takes here. So where are you at on Tyrese Maxey, Jacob?
I think that just from the outside looking in, considering how much times Embiid is missed, with Paul George being in and out of the lineup, I feel like Tyrese Maxey is like putting it upon himself to be like the guy. And with that comes a lot of shots, a lot of responsibility. And we kind of saw that like take full form in the overtime loss against the Rockets. But there was times where he has that mindset, I feel, and just has a complete tunnel vision as a decision maker. Like we've seen him take
Yeah.
completely inefficient shots. Like we've seen him settle for threes a lot, step backs, I might add, and it was greatly contested 1-on-1. And when he gets to the rim, whether it's off the pick and roll or off of his own creation, we see him like getting met with multiple defenders. And instead of, dishing out to the weak side or whatever, he just takes a complete contested shot at the
Yeah.
rim. I feel like his decision making has been the biggest thing for me, but also he is a player who benefits from Embiid's gravity. And we saw the night and day change in the win against the Bulls. Maxey was much more decisive, whether it was just being aggressive and getting to the rim, and with the pick and roll with Joel Embiid. I think they ran that a lot more in the second half, and it was truly just like a glimpse of last season. Like it felt like everything was almost restored to order in a sense because Maxey's decision making was just a truly well balanced game for him offensively, and hopefully with Embiid back and George staying consistently in the lineup, we can kind of see more of this decisiveness and like aggression and everything that makes Tyrese Maxey great. So I think it was just a weird, rough first month-ish where like constant change, drama, and it was probably affecting Maxey's game. But like I said, hopefully with health and just consistency and reps, everything can kind of get smoothed out.
Yeah, I'm not panicked about Tyrese by any means. I think these are kind of necessary growing pains for him to go through. And obviously, it's unfortunate basically having the weight of the world thrown in his shoulders a bit earlier than he's capable of carrying it. That I think the expectations have gotten extremely high at a very rapid rate for this guy. Let's not forget that just a couple seasons ago, we were talking about him just being like an X factor for this team, coming off the bench or being sort of a six-man guy. And then all of a sudden, he's thrown in the starting lineup because Ben Simmons is in a holdout. And then it's like, wait a second, they have something here. And now, obviously, he comes as a max contract player, and the expectations change greatly for this. So I think we've just seen the expectations for Tyrese kind of spiral really, really rapidly. And for what it's worth, like I think he's handled it overall pretty well. I've been really impressed with the way that he does take the stand and face the music at the microphone, not making excuses for himself, even when there's some referee stuff. And I do fully stand by. He has one of the worst whistles in the entire NBA. Really brutal, some of the lack of calls that he does get on those. But regardless, I do think there are better games ahead. And out of those career high 14 assists that he did log, 10 of them going to the big fella Joel Embiid right there. So I do think that speaks to when Embiid is in place, all the other pieces of the puzzle just fit a little better together. Now, you kind of mentioned a little bit of it fitting like last year and talking about that. One piece that is different this year is obviously Jared McCain here. Now, as far as McCain as a whole, I'm curious your thoughts on what the role for him moving forward is. He's averaging 15.8 points per game, 2.5 rebounds, 2.6 assists. His three-point percentage has dropped a little bit, but still 38.2%, which is really good there. 46.3% from the field. Incredibly crafty the way that he finished around the basket. And I've also seen some flashes of like this guy being a true playmaker in a way that maybe I have not fully seen with Tyrese here. So it's going to be interesting the decisions that Nick Nurse makes from here. But what's kind of your feeling of the role of Jared McCain now that this team is coming back into fully together, Jacob?
I think it honestly depends on the matchup. I think I saw Nick Nurse talk to, I want to say maybe Sixers Adam or someone else about this at the practice. He said that he's going to roll with the same starting lineup he went with against Chicago, I believe. And he said that he would make adjustments at halftime if need be. And obviously that means Kelly Oubre started, I believe. So and McCain came off the bench. So we'll see what happens there. But I think McCain could definitely be a starter in his rookie year. He's just been that good as a shooter, as a slasher, as a playmaker. Like you said, his playmaking has surprised me a lot. And at
Yeah.
times it's looked better than Tyrese Maxey. Like
Yeah.
he's been like a top two playmaker on this team this season, I think, with Paul George being first. But I think in a perfect world, he does start. But obviously, when you're going up against bigger teams like Orlando and Chicago, like the Sixers just did, you have to make some adjustments there. So I'm not too mad at Nick Nurse for that. But going forward, when you're playing teams like maybe Boston, like just teams that like don't have like tremendous amounts of size, 1 through 5, I think McCain should start. Also, he is someone who can provide a spark off the bench.
Yeah.
Like we've seen that. We saw it last game against the Bulls. So I think whatever work, like he's extremely portable. He can fit into any situation, and that's what makes him so effective and just such a great pick for the Sixers as well. Just his ability to spot up, play on and off the ball. So I think whatever role like he's assigned, he's just going to flourish in. So I'm not too worried either way.
Yeah, it's a huge bonus for this team to have a guy that there really were not lofty expectations for. And I mean, this very easily could have been a 16th pick that isn't even capable of cracking rotation the first year. And particularly when you take a swing on a 20-year-old one and done guy, there is risk that comes with it. But this dude has been every bit as ready at the moment as you could possibly imagine here. Straight up fearless, the way that he attacks guys. And I think Jared McCain is going to end up with a larger role on this Sixers team than any of us expected coming into the season. But we'll see how exactly that plays out here. To kind of transition to Paul George here, since we have not hit on him directly yet. It's been a strange kind of progression for Paul, and I do feel bad for him to an extent. Obviously, he dealt with both those injuries, hasn't really had that moment to fully settle in. And to kind of touch on the stats specifically here, the shooting number is not where you need him to be, but averaging 16 points per game, 5.3 rebounds, 5.2 assists, shooting 41.3% from the field, 31.2% from three, just 0.083% at the corner there, which is not at all what you expect from him. Shot well over 40% from that spot last year and has been a really good shooter from there from his career. I think a lot of that has to do with not playing next to Joel Embiid, and really when there is a larger sample size, I'm confident that'll regress to the mean there. But for Paul specifically, I'm totally with you on your assessment as the playmaking. That's been the number one thing that has been above expectation for me. His ability to drive and kick to shooters really opens up a ton for this Sixers offense. And I also think defensively, his ability to manipulate screens, get over, fight through, all those type of things really pops on the screens. And I know the Tobias Harris conversations get old at this point, but those little areas, those little, I guess, like, skills around the edges there really shine in Paul there. So I'm pretty optimistic about the version of him we've seen. I know, and I also respect, like, I think there's been moments where he's very clearly been in attack mode when there's been no Joel Embiid, and the 29-point game really stands out in my head of, like, he shot the first 4 times down the floor being like, this is my time to shine, and it was. The team needed him to. So what are you seeing from Paul, and kind of what is your expectations from here now that we're finally seeing the team fully constructed together?
I mean, I think you nailed it with the defense and the playmaking, and especially with the Tobias Harris combos. Like everyone was so quick to say he was another version of Tobias Harris, and it's just wrong at this point.
Yeah.
Like I'll give you 2 examples as a playmaker. There was so many times where we see Tobias go to the baseline or wherever in the mid range and just settle for a contested jump shot or shave 15 seconds off the shot clock. And in those situations, George draws defenders and actually kicks out, which is something Tobias like rarely did. And defensively, George just clears him as a perimeter defender, like you said, his ability to navigate screens and lock up 1-on-one. Granted, Tobias is a solid post defender, but he wasn't offering that type of versatility. So even the little things, like George just does that at so much better of a rate. And I think his playmaking has really just been so crucial for the Sixers to win 4 of the last 5 games. Like you said, that game against Charlotte, that game against Detroit as well. He was almost just used as like the guy to draw defenders and create. So I think just having that extra element of playmaking, scoring guard who can defend. I mean, that's exactly why the Sixers got him. And going forward with this role of him, Maxey, and Embiid, George kind of had a quiet night in that win against the Bulls
Yeah.
because Maxey and Embiid just carried a load of the offense and just felt so natural. So him not having to do so much on so many nights is just great for his longevity and in the near future and throughout this his contract and time with the Sixers. So I think it's almost like whatever the defense gives, like you want to put pressure on Maxey and Embiid. There's George with a bunch of open looks. And I did think in that game against the Bulls where we saw that whole big three, there was a lot of times where George just kind of stood in the corner while Maxey and Embiid ran the pick and roll. Obviously, it worked, but I think over time when they play together, Nick Nurse has to come up with strategies to kind of like do like a flex offense where you have Maxey and Embiid in the pick and roll. Maybe someone sets like a little like pin down screen for George so he can rotate around and
Yeah.
kind of get an open look. But I'm sure Nurse will, and there's going to be kinks to work out over time because we're only in game like they only play like 1 and 1/4 games together. So I think there's nothing but like growth and positivity here from the big three at this point.
Yeah, 100% there. And we kind of have hit on the, I would say, big four stars at this point, as I'm kind of throwing McCain into the category there. Probably a little ambitious. But to dive a little deeper onto this team, there are some guys around the edges that I really think are worth digging in on. So I want to start with Gershon Yabusele here. So a guy that obviously was the Olympic hero. We were fired up. We saw the dunk on LeBron. And frankly, he was good from start to finish in that tournament. The Sixers swoop in there. They land him on a minimum contract. And he's been everything they could have hoped for and more. Now, there's been a little bit of these whispers of how desirable he is in a trade because he's on a minimum contract with the new CBA, minimum contracts being basically more valuable than ever. But I frankly have no interest in moving on from Gershon Yabusele pretty much whatsoever. The only world where that makes sense to me is if this falls to a really sunken season in which there is not a playoff outlook. I think we're scrapping out of that hole here. And I will circle back to that particular conversation, but to stick on Yabu for a second, we really talked going into the season about the concern at the power forward position. I no longer have that I think this dude can be that guy. And I know we've primarily seen him in a center role, kind of alternating with Andre Drummond here. But now that Embiid is back, that's really what I want to see. And I mean, the 3-point numbers speak for themselves. That shooting right around 40% from start to finish, more polished as a playmaker than I ever could have imagined. He's a hustler defensively, take charges. I'm in on Yabusele. So Jacob, do you see the same vision as me? And do you have any interest in considering a trade for
I was on Yabusele since that game against the New Zealand Breakers, to be honest
him?
with you. Like
Love it.
he like you said, he's just such a complete player from the playmaking to the shooting to the solid help defense at times. Like he's exactly what the Sixers have needed at the four position. And I still think it's a little bit of a concern, especially when you have Caleb Martin often playing out of position. Maybe Gershon gets to start at power forward and for the near future, but we'll see. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of quality role players on the trade market, so we'll see what happens there. As far as trading him, I'm 100% agreement with you. Like unless this gets to a point where Embiid's going to be listed out for a next month or two, whatever, which is not happening. Doesn't appear so now. I don't want to jinx anything,
Yeah, knock on
but yeah,
wood.
yeah, you need to go all in this year. And Gershon Yabusele is a player who greatly raises your ceiling in the playoffs with all the things he can do on both ends of the ball. So having him at the four spot next to Embiid, it's going to be a great luxury, and I don't think the Sixers should trade that at all. And when it comes to next summer, I'm not sure the exact cap situation at the moment, but I'm sure the Sixers will try to resign him. I know not a lot of contenders have a lot of space, so it seems like the Wizards and Nets who have a lot of flexibility, and I just don't really see that as an option. I mean, unless Gershon just really wants the bag, but we'll see when that time comes. But for now, I think he should remain a Sixer for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I started to dive into kind of the cap situation last week, and my kind of conclusion is a lot of it depends on what goes down at the deadline and where in the where they're exactly sitting in kind of the salary cap situation. So I think those conversations should be reserved until the offseason when there's more a concrete picture there. It does seem pretty unlikely they're going to be able to re-sign him and that there will be a team that likely outbids them, but let's wait until we get there at this point. The Sixers' goal is to contend this season, and draft picks average a nice 0.0 points per game, 0.0 rebounds, and everything else. So I'm in on Gershon being a part of this team. Now, you mentioned Caleb Martin there, and I do think that is probably a bit of a controversial topic at this point in time with the Sixers team. Nick Nurse had an interesting quote today, basically talking about how banged up he is, playing through injuries, and that's really been the reputation of Caleb Martin throughout his career. I know even last year with the Heat that a lot of the Miami beat reporters were talking about the same thing, that his numbers would look way better, but he's playing through injuries right now while Jimmy Butler and other guys are unable to play. Where are you at with Caleb? Because I personally still side with the things that I believe that he's going to snap out of this, he's going to get healthy, and he's going to be a guy that can swing playoff games for the Sixers team. But it certainly has not looked pretty. Shooting below 30% from three. Really, the shot looks a little awkward there, and there has never been this kind of stretch of time where he's found his role on the Sixers team. He certainly isn't a guy that has been able to scale up offensively the way that I hoped. But what do you think about Caleb Martin and what you've seen so far?
I would like to say this first before I say anything else. If I see Caleb Martin get more on ball reps one more time, I'm going to lose it because
Yeah.
even with Miami, he was not an on the ball player. So I don't know why Nick Nurse is almost designing plays for him to be the ball handler. He's not a great finisher. He's not someone who can really finish off the dribble at a high level. He's not like some elite playmaker. Like he's just not.
Yeah.
And I think maybe that's because the Sixers are so depleted. But even then, I saw it in the Chicago game. But I think him being in a role where he can just catch and shoot almost all the time, he can cut. I think that's a lot better for him. But as far as his health goes, I mean, obviously, it's so apparent that he's banged up. And
Yeah.
obviously, he has a bit of an unorthodox shooting form, but this season it's been a little bit ridiculous, especially with the release. He just looks uncomfortable shooting the basketball. I think he did have a shoulder injury, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. And it's been
Yeah, so
taped up pretty
exactly.
heavily, too.
I mean, yeah, exactly. That's it right there. So I think he just needs to get healthy. And like you said, he is probably one of the best playoff risers on this team. He will swing games. There will be hopefully crucial moments where he'll have like a few threes that'll really just be pivotal, almost like Jason Tatum did to this team in Game 6. But I don't want to talk about that anymore. But no, I do have faith in Caleb, but things I'm seeing offensively, especially with the ball handling thing, I guess it's more of a nurse thing, but still, it's a little frustrating at times. But yeah, I still have faith in Caleb, and he's also been very solid on the defensive end, which he just for
Yeah.
some reason really isn't getting a lot of credit for.
Yeah, no, you're right about that. I still think he's been their best perimeter defender, and there has not really been
Yes.
much light shined on that. So shout out to Caleb. I do respect you gutting through this, and I do think that there are better days ahead for him in a Sixers uniform. So I understand. I'm with everybody screaming at Caleb Martin online right now because it has not been pretty thus far. But just relax a little bit. They will come here. Now, another guy who had a bit of a rough patch and kind of have played his way out of it, Kelly Oubre here. So Oubre, it's been an up and down trajectory, I would really say, throughout his entire NBA career. I had basically zero expectations when the Sixers signed him last year. Maybe this will work out. He played himself into really a fan favorite and a guy that impacted winning in a pretty high level, I would say. Then he came back this season, got a more notable contract, and there was a part of me that was concerned that he was going to come back to the bad version of Kelly Oubre that I did not want to see here. That really hasn't proven to be the case. There's certainly been some moments where he's played a little bit above his head here, but I think especially of late in the past stretch of games, he's been pretty excellent for this Sixers team, particularly defensively. Really impressed with the way that he's committed to that side of the ball. I mean, all the energy stuff that he does, the baseline cuts, the slam dunks, the catch and lobs, all these type of things I think are important for this Sixers team. Where are you at on Kelly Oubre? And same kind of conversation. Is that a guy that you would consider throwing in as a trade chip as we kind of shift into those conversations?
It's funny, I'm someone who's always pretty critical of Oubre, but yeah, I do want to give him credit. He's been really solid these past stretch of games. Like he's been really locked in on the defensive end. He's done all the little things, deflect passes, create turnovers, create transition opportunities, rebound, and he's also been a lot more confident as a shooter, I
Yeah,
think. I think his release has been much quicker. He's been much more decisive about what he wants to do with the ball. Obviously, there's still some hilarious moments where he'll try to finish over like 10 defenders at the rim, but no, he's
gotta
been
love
good. He's been a good, yeah,
it.
he's been a good energy guy. His shooting's been passable, but obviously we'll see how much that translates. But I think with Embiid back, he'll be at his best, and we kind of saw a glimpse of that on Sunday. So I do want to be more positive on Kelly because I've been very hard on him. Like obviously he's had to do a little bit more and knowing his play style, he's loved to do that, but I think he will need to scale down to kind of just be that guy who can embrace, cutting and shooting, kind of like what Caleb Martin needs to do. But if there was a trade to, I don't think this is realistic at all, like this type of package. But if it came down to trading him to get someone like Herb Jones, I'll pay for his ticket to New Orleans. So I think that like for now he's good, but if you can upgrade that wing spot and Uber has to go, I think then you definitely should.
Yeah, no, I hear you on that. And I did want to dig in on Herb Jones a little bit. I have seen you all over him, and I'm on your side of things here that I am a Herb Jones guy. Big fan of what he could bring to this team. And to kind of lay out the stats here, 10.7 points per game, 3.4 rebounds, 2.0 assists, shooting just 29.2% from three last year, but he shot up over 40% from the corners last year, 51.8% from the field, 36.4% from the corners this year, still just 26 years old. Certainly a guy who the stats don't tell the story of who he is as a player, that defensively he's off the charts by my money's worth on the short list of absolutely top 10 perimeter defenders, probably top 5 perimeter defenders across the entire league. Gets his hands everywhere. It does seem like there's a bit of a fire sale brewing down there in New Orleans as they've gotten off to an even more disastrous start of a team like the Sixers. So sell me the vision on Herb Jones and what he could potentially bring to this Sixers team.
I thought stats did actually tell me the story. He averages 10.7 points per game. I thought he was an average player. I mean, that's what Twitter told me.
Sure,
I
yeah.
thought I thought he was just averaging. Okay, but no, for real. He's like I said on Twitter. I think this is a perfect like thing to describe him. He's a definition of a defensive playmaker. Like his anticipation, his perimeter defense, like his instincts, his wingspan. Like he uses all of those so perfectly to just force turnovers, help on drives, lock up off the point of attack. Like he's just everything you would want as a championship contending team. He's just so good at that forward position. He can defend guards and forwards, and he's just truly the complete package. And for anyone like concerned with 3 point percentage, like you mentioned, he shot 40 something percent from the corner last season, and context is key for this type of thing. Almost the same thing with Dorian Finney-Smith last season. Like you have to realize the Pelicans have been so banged up with injuries
Yeah.
that his primary creators from like more than half of the season have been Alfred Payton, who is now off the team, and Brandon Boston Jr. So when you have no one who can create like great looks for you, obviously you're going to struggle. And you mentioned the corner shooting, right? Embiid theoretically would obviously draw two or three defenders almost every possession and quick kick out to Herb in the corner. It's an easy three. It's almost like the Batum thing last year. So I think he'd be a perfect fit even on both ends. He's also a guy who can attack the rim on occasion as well. So just a great all around player who will raise your ceiling like a Caleb Martin.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. That's a guy that I would be interested in. We did get a little report from the Stein line here. Shout out to Philly Sixers Galaxy for tweeting this out, saying Kelly Oubre and KJ Martin are the six.
Sham said teams are interested
Sure,
and not that the Pelicans are actually wanting to give him up.
that's a good point.
So with that being said, you kind of have to offer the best thing you can. And I think KJ Martin, in terms of salary and just his upside, is probably the best thing you can offer, like contract wise, but also the place where the Sixers have the advantage that not a lot of other contending teams do is the draft capital they
Right.
have. I think if I always use like kind of the Rudy Gobert trade and the Mikal Bridges trade as a barometer of how to like know what a player's worth in this insanely saturated trade market. But I think a package of like two first round picks, maybe three, because he's going to have a really intense market. I think maybe three. I think yeah, definitely three gets it done. But if it's going to be two, they're going to have to spam some seconds, like it's NBA 2K. So I think we'll have to go for a lot of draft capital. But obviously, really good thing is the Sixers have a lot of that, and they also have a lot of contracts that could financially work because Herb only makes, I think, approximately 13 million. So that's like Kelly Oubre, that's KJ Martin, like the report said, that's Caleb Martin. Whether you want to trade him is a whole nother thing, but yeah, they have a lot of ways to make it work.
Yeah, so interesting to see if those conversations kind of spiral from here. And to be honest, like as much as we've talked about the encore reasons, this is one of the driving forces why I was so in on this Paul George plan. Is you kept all this flexibility. You did not have to give up all your draft picks. For example, to use Jimmy Butler, who's obviously kind of in his spiral down in Miami right now. If Jimmy Butler was the guy you were trying to pair with Joel Embiid here, it would have taken all the assets that you had to kind of make that happen, and then you're out of luck beyond that. The Sixers made their choice by bringing in Paul George, and now you still got some flexibility to play with. So little hat tip to Daryl that I think he deserves a little bit more credit for that. But to kind of stay on KJ Martin for a second, this is a guy who we talked about coming into the season basically as a human trade exception, that he was the balloon contract to be shipped off at the deadline and has played himself into a better role than that there. So what have you seen from KJ Martin, and like how sustainable is this from the standpoint of the context of the Sixers team? Is he a guy that's going to be a constant rotation guy, and do you think he's deserving of minutes on an every night basis?
I'm not saying this because he follows me on Twitter, but KJ Martin has been truly excellent. I
Wow.
think I've been in on KJ Martin since they got him in that Harden trade a year ago. I just think he impacts the game in a lot of ways that translate to winning. Like his ability as a cutter, like we saw that in full display in the win against the Magic. Paul George was able to so easily collapse a lane, and he just fed KJ so many open looks. Like with Kelly Oubre, like and Caleb Martin not really, embracing that cutting role too consistently, having a guy like KJ whose youth and athleticism lets his whole what okay, I lost my thought. But anyways, but having an athletic guy like KJ is just so essential to this team full of vets. And I think a big thing that sparked the Sixers winning 4 of their 5 games was the youth movement they kind of had to go through with all the injuries. Like him, Ricky Council, Jared McCain, they've all swung games this
Yeah.
past week. And just having someone who could do that while being a versatile defender, which I don't think KJ really gets enough credit on as the defensive end, just having that is great. And I think if he continues to play at this rate, there may really have to be just some crazy, outstanding trade offer to even contemplate trading him. Like I wouldn't trade him just for the sake of it. And think I've said that before on here.
Yeah, don't make changes just to make changes. That this has to be something that is directly making this team better. I've been really impressed with KJ, and particularly on the defensive side of the ball, I've been blown away. You don't see a lot of 6'6" guys who excel as rim protectors, but that's KJ Martin, man. His verticality, the way that he gets around the rim, pinning shots off the backboard, the weak side rotations that he just has really good instincts for getting to is really impressive. He's just 23 years old still. He might have just turned 24 this week, actually, but I'm never in a rush to give up young talent, and particularly with this Sixers team, like I think the best days of KJ Martin are still coming in the future, and he does a lot in a very limited opportunity here. So I give KJ a lot of credit, and my kind of takeaway from him has certainly changed as the season has gone on. So will be interesting to see how that plays itself out there. Now, we are in the heart of trade season. We're starting to get there to this point. I did want to talk a little bit more about the Jimmy Butler conversation. So we did get the reports coming out, kind of have been rumored for a while now of Jimmy's unhappiness, even dating back to this summer. We saw the report of him being connected to the Phoenix Suns, allegedly from Shams Charania, and then that being directly shot down from the agent there. So kind of what you're feeling the Jimmy Butler, just whole conversation inside of things here, and what's your perception of what's going down there in South Beach?
I think it all stems that Pat Riley, I think we even heard whispers this summer that his relationship with Pat Riley, it's been a little tense.
Yeah,
I think Pat Riley made some little sneak disses, I think, in the like final media day of their season. So I think that's where it all started. And when you combine that with the fact that the Heat don't really want to give Jimmy Butler that max extension, and Jimmy is a guy who always, knows his worth and wants his money, it's going to be a bad situation. Obviously, Jimmy wants his money, and the Heat are in a weird place right now. Like, obviously, I think they're in what, fifth or sixth seed. They're a few games above 500, but obviously, they're not like a championship contender. They're just not. They're a playoff team, but they're not like a legit threat to, make a finals run. So the Heat are really in this weird like franchise thing where like they never want to really rebuild. They just kind
right.
of want to retool and just see what happens. So I think that, maybe trading him to a place like the Rockets or the Warriors is the best move. And I think Mark Steiner Shams reported that those were some of his locations of interest. I think the Mavs are up there too. Obviously the Suns aren't. I mean, you saw what just happened, but no, I think the Warriors and the Rockets are good destinations for him because they have a lot of like young players, a lot of upside. Like Jonathan Kuminga is the first person that comes to mind. Like maybe a potential deal like that could work. Houston has a lot of guys like Amen Thompson, Tari Eason. I don't know if they would trade the Terrence Twins, but like they have a lot of guys too. So I think just having those types of teams like where you can kind of retool and remain competitive, which is what Miami's done for almost their entire franchise history, is just probably the best move. But yeah, Jimmy's probably not going to be in a Heat uniform past February.
Yeah, and I do think that they need to make that happen. That I think you're just heading towards disaster if you let this linger. We've seen Jimmy burn down organizations in multiple locations at this point when he's not getting his way or happy there. And frankly, he can just opt out of his player option and walk away as a free agent this summer. So I think they're better off trying to get something for him. Who knows what that ultimately plays itself out of? But kind of surprised that this is happening this early on in the season or leaking out the way it is. Now, to put a Sixers slant on this, obviously Jimmy Butler is kind of romanticized in the head of Sixers fans here. For my money's worth, a little bit, I guess the perception of Jimmy is far better than the reality of who he is as a basketball player. He certainly has those stretches, and like, I mean, that series against the Bucks is by my money's worth some of the best basketball I've ever seen an individual play. He certainly has those terror stretches where he can absolutely carry a team, but there's also a lot of stretches where he's pretty disinterested in playing basketball or competing on a night-to-night basis. If you knew what was going to happen now, would you have any pause for Paul George being the guy, or are you locked in and agree that Paul George was the best option if all things were equal?
I think hindsight is always 2020. I
Yeah.
think signing Paul George is the right move for a variety of reasons. One, he simply fits the team better, and two, like we said earlier, Morey saved all that draft capital for more flexibility for a potential move down the line. Jimmy, like you said, Sixers fans often praise him, and he's earned every bit of that praise. He's one of the biggest playoff risers in the last 20 years. Like he's made exceptional runs, but like you said, his regular season play is very inconsistent. His motor is very inconsistent during the regular season,
Yeah.
and his fit is also kind of questionable in the Sixers right now. And I think what a lot of people fail to realize is Paul George is not going anywhere this season. The only way Paul George goes somewhere is if everything is really hitting the fan a year or two from now and they consider a move. Like this isn't NBA 2K where you sign a guy to a max contract, you're going to flip him in next season's deadline. And even if they did, I don't even think the Sixers would be able to pay Butler that max contract. They will be way over the second
Yeah.
tax apron. It would be an absolute mess. So, in funny enough, it will be the same exact situation almost as 2019 when we lost him in the first place. So,
Yeah. No, you're spot on with all of that. And by the way, what would it say league-wide if Daryl Morey hands a max contract to Paul George and trades him halfway through this season? You're shooting yourself in the foot for the future there. So I don't see any
I
world
would
where
love that.
yeah, for sure. I don't think there's any world where Jimmy Butler is any sort of legitimately connected to this Sixers team. I do think it's going to be a bit of a fire sale down there in Miami as they try and navigate this and figure things out. To their credit, Tyler Hero has taken a leap this year. Bam Adebayo has been underwhelming, but there is some talent still on this roster. They're going to be a team in the mix, and that's sort of the way that Miami does it. Like you mentioned, trying to retool. They're going to be on the prowl for that next big ticket free agent to come and hang out in South Beach and play some hoops down there. So they'll be back sooner rather than later, but I do think this is shaping up into a pretty distracting season that could be for the Heat there. So interesting to see how it does play out there. I did want to show a little bit of shine to you for, I know you've been popping down to the Blue Coats a little bit, to look a little deeper
Mhm.
on this Sixers roster. Is there anybody down there or on the younger side on this roster that you've really has been jumping out to you, or any guys that you want to dig in specifically first?
Are we talking Blue Coast or the roster in general?
Either way, wherever you want to take it. If it wants to be some Jeff Doughton, some Justin Edwards, or any other name that you want to throw out there,
I need to get my Kyle Lowry thing out the way first.
hit me.
I promise you it'll be quick. All I gotta say is this: if he's not getting used as a ball handler, there is no reason for him to be on the floor. There just isn't. Like he's an okay spot up shooter. He shot well the first few games of the season, but since then he's fallen off a cliff, and obviously that comes with being in his late mid 30s. So I just think if he's not shooting well, if he's not being used as a facilitator, he's practically useless on the floor. I know that's harsh, but it's the truth. And obviously, the Sixers backup guard play is a little bit underwhelming, but I think you might have to consider going with Reggie Jackson for the time being. Obviously, that's not the greatest option, but at this point in his career, he's a better shot creator than Lowry. He'll give you something, like he'll give you scoring, give you like a little bit of burst that will swing games here and there. So I think it's just much more than what Lowry's offering. But as far for the Bluecoats, the last game I went to on Monday, Justin Edwards played extremely well. He was a guy I always kind of had my eyes on as an undrafted free agent that the Sixers picked up. He just showed like a lot of ability to be that two-way wing that the Sixers could potentially use in the future. Really good, really smart perimeter defender, really good motion shooter. He even showed some playmaking chops and some ability to get to the rim. So it was a really good all-around performance for him. P. Nance was also a guy who made his debut at the game I covered. Really nice guy. I got to interview him a little bit, but he's just kind of your prototypical, stretch four, stretch five if you want to go small. Really smart help defender, was in all the right spots. So those are some two guys that are definitely on my radar that could maybe help the Sixers in a year or so, maybe.
Nice. Yeah, good stuff there. Let's stick on the young guys, and I do want to circle back to the Lowry conversation here. But as far as Justin Edwards, that's the exact type of players that you should be taking lottery tickets on as a team, as he was a top recruit. Basically, was unable to carve out a real role for himself at Kentucky, which frankly just happens at Kentucky. I mean, obviously, Coach Calipari has moved on now and is at Arkansas, but that was kind of his tactic: is bring in as many top-ranked recruits as you can and let them dog it out. And the Reed Shepherds and Rob Dillinghams of the world sort of overshadowed Justin Edwards, who was a top 5 recruit last year. I think that was a little bit of an ambitious label to call him a top 5 recruit. I did get a chance to watch him once in high school, as he is a Philadelphia guy, went to Emotep Charter. Didn't know if he stood out quite to that level to me, but he did show some flashes still, like that Alabama game that he played in college, where I believe he finished with 29 in that game, hit 7 3-pointers. Like, you see it. And then when I got a chance to interview him not too long ago, he seemed pretty like keyed in on like my future, my pathway in the NBA is as a defense first guy. And I think, to be honest, that's a huge compliment to like be able to realize that already in your career when you are still 19 in your rookie season, having a chance to figure out, okay, this is the lane that I need to run through. And I think you can be successful in it, to be perfectly honest. Like, you can't teach 6'7" and athletic the way that he is there. So is that kind of what you're seeing as well, as he is embracing that defensive side of the ball? And offensively, I guess I'll throw one more at you. The player comp that I've kind of created for him is Derrick Jones Jr. Now, Jones Jr. is another tier of athlete that I don't think Edwards quite get, but from a role standpoint, that's kind of where I see him projecting at. What do you think about that, or do you have a better name that you would throw my way?
I think that's like pretty accurate. I think a guy I would go with is definitely like a Najee Marshall type of player because I
Okay.
think he has like a similar physical build to Najee than he does to Derrick Jones Jr., but both are really solid comparisons. Like more specifically defensively, like he was really smart. Like he knew when to help and he knew when to recover. And his like lateral movement, it was just great. Navigating screens, guarding one-on-one. He really just was a complete package as a perimeter defender. And the Colts ran a lot of like staggered screens that like let it like freed him up for like an easy weak side shot, and he capitalized on that more times than not. I mentioned his abilities on the ball, so yeah, he really is just a complete solid prospect who I really think could make an impact in like maybe 2 years and off the Sixers bench. So yeah, I'm really high on Justin Edwards specifically.
Nice. Love to hear that. How'd the boy Jeff Doughton look? As I do think he's kind of a unique case. Obviously, on the older side of you ever see for a two-way contract, pushing the envelope as far as possible. We've seen some nice flashes from Doughton. I think he's really solid as a basketball player. A guy that plays within his box, isn't going to do too much. But what does he look like when he does have a chance to kind of run the show down there with the Coats?
He was another guy I was actually able to interview. Great, really nice guy, but
Weird voice.
it's unfortunate because 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 like we've seen him through summer league, like we've seen him through like G League. We just seen him dominate as this like versatile three-level scoring playmaking guard. Just his ability to get to the mid-range and just do all these different things offensively, but unfortunately just has never seemed to really translate into the NBA unless it's like garbage time minutes. Like even in his brief stint with the Sixers, I want to say it was like 3 weeks ago at this point, like he really just wasn't able to do anything impactful on the floor. But in the G League, I mean, the 2 games I've been to in person, he's been great. He's been great as a playmaker, as an ISO scorer. Like there was so many times in that game against the main Celtics I went to 2 weeks ago where it was just him and JD Davison just going band for band as scorers, and it was just so fun to watch. So I hope one day he'll maybe get an opportunity, whether it's with the Sixers or another team, kind of just get another shot at NBA ball. But he, as it stands at this point, he's just a G League legend.
Yeah, for sure. And shout out JD Davidson too. Fun player. I believe he
Oh,
broke the
he's so fun. Yeah.
yeah. I think he broke the all-time record for the main Celtics for scoring down there. So shout out to him. Obviously, a guy that surely wants to get the league at some point. But it's definitely keep going down to this Blue Coats game. They're worth checking out and awesome
Oh
people
yeah,
down
sure.
there for sure. Now, to bring it back a little bit to the vets, you did mention Kyle Lowry. So I was on with shout out to RB Philly Take before this. We got into a little bit of a debate here. I'll throw it to you. I'll phrase it to you this way. You can pick one player to completely kick off this Sixers team. Is it Eric Gordon or is it Kyle Lowry?
Oh, I forgot about Eric Gordon. We didn't even talk about it.
For good reason.
I think I think I'd go Eric Gordon, to be quite honest with you.
Me as well.
I think even like off the court, I think Kyle Lowry has a lot of value as like a veteran leadership type of role, because I think even Tara Hatcher mentioned one game how he's almost embraced like an assistant coach type of role. I think she said the players even jokingly call him like Coach Lowry or something like that. Obviously, he has a really funny, interesting relationship with Jared McCain that obviously made the TikTok last week, which is absolutely hilarious. So I think for even just mentorship purposes, even just I think he's a much smarter basketball player than Eric Gordon too,
Yeah.
even though he's not really been impactful himself. But I think just with all that value, I would definitely pick Kyle Lowry and just send Eric Gordon straight for agency. No disrespect.
Yeah, no, that's the side of things I sit on as well. That I think Gordon's probably the most frustrated I've been with the player just because it's been basically nothing that he's brought to the table here. And I understand, like, there's a lot more that has gone wrong with the Sixers team than just Eric Gordon. And I still see a world where theoretically it works playing next to Joel Embiid, where it's just catch and shoot opportunities, just being a floor spacer, that type of thing. There really hasn't been how things have played out, and that's more of a Joel thing than a Gordon thing. But I do think that he pretty much brings not anything in the table in that regard when,
Nothing.
yeah, when there's no Joel there. For Kyle, I think all the concerns and complaints about him are Nick Nurse issues, not Kyle Lowry issues. That I hear you. There should not. He's played too much. I can agree with that statement there. But I still like the value of having him around Tyrese Maxey, around Jared McCain as guys to learn from. And there are still those moments like the other game when we were watching, or the other night where I forget which game it was exactly, but they just needed an inbounds pass late in the game, and Kyle Lowry subs in just for that. Stuff like that, I think is valuable to have him on the team for. So did want to throw you that question there. But do totally agree. As far as the backup point guard conversation, you did mention Reggie Jackson being a guy that you could see take things on. Do you see a world where just like Tyrese Maxey and Jared McCain can just kind of split up the minutes? Do you think Nick Nurse could lean in that direction? Because that's kind of what I would like to see.
I think that might be the reason that McCain's come off the bench as well. Like especially like regardless of what matchup it is, I think McCain's probably the top three playmaker on this team. Like when Embiid's healthy and when Maxi's like more consistent, and all that. Like I really am confident in Jared McCain's decision making as a ball handler, and I think that's definitely something they could potentially do. Like obviously, I don't know like the level of trust Nick Nurse has
Yeah.
in him yet. Although he's been amazing, I know Nurse has been pretty tough on rookies, I would say. And I think that, having him on the bench as a guy who can play make, create his own shot, go off the ball, I think is a big luxury. And I think with if Kyle Lowry just continues to just add nothing, and if he's not being utilized enough as a facilitator, and if Nick doesn't trust Reggie enough, I think, yeah, that's definitely a route they can go on. And I think a lot of things, I think like this roster, obviously, we've seen with all the injuries that like we may have overestimated the Sixers depth a little bit besides like Yabusele. So I think one major hole that isn't really being, I mean, it is, but like I think the power forward voice kind of overshadow it is like this team needs a true point guard. And we kind of thought Kyle Lowry would be that, but obviously with age, it's really just limited his impact. So if Daryl Morey can kind of get someone for cheap or just kind of like a side deal or even a main trade, who knows, maybe like a Dennis Schroeder, like Finney Smith package. I don't know if that's like financially possible, but like if he's able to like just get someone serviceable to play like just 12 minutes a game a backup point, it would be huge for this team.
Yeah, 100% there. So we're starting to see those kind of wheels turn of the NBA trade deadline. That will be something to keep an eye on here. But luckily, some pretty good vibes for the first time this season with the Sixers team. So to look ahead a little bit for their next 5 games against the Indiana Pacers on Friday, then back-to-backs against the Hornets. That's on Monday and Friday. Then the Cavaliers and then the Spurs before a matchup with the Celtics. So we'll stay away from the Christmas matchup for now. We'll just look at those next 5 games, which once again, Pacers, Hornets, Cavs, Spurs. What's your prediction for those next 5, Jacob?
They'll go matchup by matchup. So
Mhm.
Pacers, 4-day break. Embiid should be good. If not, it's a little bit alarming.
Yep.
But considering the update we had today and how well he played Sunday, I'm confident he'll play. But obviously, Sixers, we never know. But regardless, the Pacers are a team they could definitely beat, which I think they will,
Yeah.
because the Pacers themselves have been decimated by injuries. Their front court is practically non-existent. And they're also a team who's been in a bit of an identity crisis. Halliburton's been very on and off this season. They're not that same like run and gun offense that we saw last season. So they're in a bit of a funk. Pascal's been getting utilized weird. He's not getting used as a playmaker in the half court. There's a lot of weird things there. So I think the Sixers can take advantage of that, snag a win there. And you said the Hornets are next up.
Yep, back-to-back against the Hornets. And real
Gee,
quick
I
on
feel like all he plays the Magic and Hornets. Jesus.
yeah, for real. Real quick on Halliburton, man, when things aren't
Mhm.
clicking for him, man, it's a tough watch
Oh
for
God, it's
Halliburton.
rough.
Yeah, I
Mhm.
he obviously had kind of his breakout where we were giving him all his love and deservingly so that he was playing terrific at a time as this all NBA guard and all-star guard here. He has not looked like that very consistently at all this year. And I think if I'm a Pacers fan, I would certainly be panicking about Halliburton because there's been some concerning stretches this year.
Very, yeah, his inaggressiveness and just settling for threes has been very alarming. But to kind of pivot to another team that has a very good point guard, the Hornets.
Yeah.
I think LaMelo is still going to be out for those next 2 games with a calf strain, I believe it is. So Hornets are going to be shorthanded, even regardless of LaMelo. Their depth has been also depleted. Like I think Nick Richards just came back. They got their center depth back, but like Miles Bridges is going to be out. Grant Williams, obviously, and I know there's a few more players I can't remember off the top of my head. But regardless, they're not a very good team, and the Sixers need to capitalize on that both times because even though they are 1.5 games back from eighth, they're still 7-15, and you
Yeah.
still got to close that 500 deficit somehow. So these are games that I don't want to say must win. Yeah, I will say they're must wins. You got to beat teams like this, especially in
Yeah.
the position you're in. And you said Cavs are next up
Yep, Cavs next up.
on a back to back, so that'll be interesting to see if Embiid is going to play. I personally don't think he will, but I think the Cavs, regardless, are a very tough matchup because they're a very big team, obviously with Allen and Mobley. So I think they probably lose that game, Embiid or not, to be quite honest. And I think it's the Spurs.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah, Spurs. I think it's if everyone's healthy and the big three is good, I think they could win that game. Obviously, Wemby's going to be a handful. Stephon Castles looked amazing. Chris Paul has revitalized his career again in San Antonio.
Crazy.
Harrison Barnes has been. No one's really talking about how solid Harrison Barnes has been this season. It's a really fun young team, but I think the Sixers are better and they have more star power at the end of the day. But you just can't let that team hang around. Like I watched the game where they played the Warriors, where the Warriors kind of just let their foot off the gas. Wemby, Area 51, toughest nickname in the NBA.
Sick.
They were able to just dominate and do their thing. So I think they can handle them. But obviously, they're a team that can compete on any given night. And yeah, I think I want to be optimistic. I'm going to say 4-1.
I like it. I'm in the same spot here. I think the Cavs game is the only one they lose, and those first 3 specifically have to be must wins. That you got to get yourself double-digit wins sitting at 7-15 right now. You got to get to 10-15, and we're probably talking about being in the play-in mix if that is the case here, especially when factoring in like a team with the Hornets right in the same mix here. The Sixers have now passed them on the depth chart, but like a win against playing the Pacers would go a long way from a standings perspective at this point in the game. So still a lot of more questions than answers with this Sixers team, but I do think that they are turning a corner. So any final thoughts on kind of the state of the team before we sign off here, Jacob?
I think with how like pessimistic and how hectic everything has been, I think that it's just so good to have some positivity and
Yeah,
some actual signs of hope. Like that game against the Bulls, even though it was just an average, game that nobody was really watching because the Eagles were on.
needed it.
Like I said in the beginning, it just felt so good to kind of have some sense of familiarity and just for the Sixers to be able to dominate the way they did. Just to see Maxey and Embiid spam that pick and roll again and again. It was just such a beautiful sight to see considering all this team has been throughout just December 11th of the year. So yeah, I think just positivity. Like they have a good stretch where they can finally gain some momentum. And I think from there, I mean, if everything goes right health wise, I think we just start, go 4-1, just kind of never look back. So
A
here's
hun-
hoping.
100%. So hopefully this is officially the corner that this Sixers team has turned. But I'm going to be here on Sixers Digest breaking things down from start to finish no matter what. Going to be continuing to chop it up with Jacob throughout the season here. So we will be back doing these breakdowns and talking a little bit more about the state of the team. So make sure you're staying with us. The best way to do that is by smashing that subscribe button. Drop a like on this video if you have not already. And any other comments, you drop them below. We'll be back talking with you next time right here on Sixers Digest. Peace.